in the incredible irony department, down in Arkansas, there's a woman by the name of Leslie Rutledge who's running for AG, for Attorney General, top cop in the state. Now, Arkansas recently passed it being a Republican, having a Republican legislature and having a not inconsequential African-American population. Bernie mentioned during the last hour how, isn't it interesting that North Dakota, which is a Republican state, has the least restrictive voting rules in the entire United States. You can register to vote and vote on the same day. They have early voting, they have mail-in voting, they have everything. It's super convenient and easy to vote, and you don't have to show ID. You just have to sign, saying, yes, I swear under penalty of perjury and going to prison for 2 years that I am who I say I am and I'm eligible to vote. That's all you have to do. North Dakota is virtually all white. If you look across the United States, what you find is that the states where Republicans have been introducing voter suppression laws, whether they're voter ID laws or purge the voter list laws or, all of the above. Actually, most of these voter suppression efforts are fairly comprehensive and multifaceted. The states where they do this are the states that have substantial minority populations and or swing states. They don't care about North Dakota. They don't need to suppress, they don't care about vote. Oh, there's no voter fraud in North Dakota. It's all white people, right? And Republican white people. They're not going to ignore the fact that many of the actual 31 cases of voter fraud that have been caught and prosecuted in the last 14 years were Republicans. So anyhow, here's this Republican, Leslie Rutledge, who's running for AG in Arkansas. And it turns out that under the voter suppression law that was passed by the Arkansas legislature, if you're registered to vote in another state and you forgot to cancel your registration, which, by the way, is probably the case for a third of Americans who have moved in the last couple of years. I mean, just ask yourself, how many times in your life, I grew up in Michigan. I lived in Lansing and Detroit and up in the Upper Peninsula. We moved to New Hampshire, then we moved to Georgia, then we moved to Germany, then we moved back to Georgia, then we moved to Vermont, then we moved to Oregon, and now I'm in Washington, D.C. And every time I move someplace new, I register to vote. And I just frankly always assumed that my old state would notice that I wasn't there anymore. Something would bounce, or maybe the new state would notify them. Now, this last time around, just to make sure, I actually sent a letter off to Oregon saying, I'm not in your state anymore. But, and then that's also so that I don't get jury duty notices and ignore them and end up on a, arrest warrant list or something. But Leslie Rutledge, so as part of the voter suppression efforts, they say, hey, who moves more frequently, rich people or poor people? Well, it turns out, I'm not a rich person, but the general rule of thumb is that the lower people are on the socioeconomic ladder, the more likely they are to move periodically looking for work. So, hey, let's make it so that it's easy to suppress the vote of people who recently moved. And so they passed that law in Arkansas. And here's the story by Aviva Shen over at thinkprogress.org. Arkansas Attorney General candidate Leslie Rutledge is crying foul over the cancellation of her voter registration form. Rutledge, the Republican nominee for Attorney General, was kicked off the voter rolls after it was discovered that she had failed to cancel previous voter registrations in Washington, D.C. and Virginia and re-register in Pulaski County where she moved. She's calling this a dirty trick, right? But in fact, they note at Think Progress, it is very common, becoming even more common after the state implemented a number of strict voter restrictions. In fact, the chair of the Democratic Party in that state said, quote, 1,000 eligible voters had their absentee ballots thrown out earlier this year following the implementation of these new guidelines. In Ohio, some voters have even been criminally prosecuted for fraud because they followed flawed instructions. During voter purges in Florida and Colorado, many eligible voters were removed for similar reasons that Rutledge was. Outdated address, a typo, it flags you as fraudulent. Boom, off you go. So, and now the Republican National Lawyers Association has come to her defense saying, this is outrageous. She was systematically, I'm quoting from them, systematically removed from voter rolls within 90 days of a federal election. That's outrageous. Guess who was pushing for the voter purge? The law. The Republican National Lawyers Association. Ironically, they note overthink progress. The RNLA has been instrumental in pushing mass voter purges across the country, specifically defending the right to purge voters within 90 days of the election. Right.